Sarvam nishkarshayat jagat Swatantram abodasyeha Kimasat karma bir bhavet. Ladies. Kala chakram pranitikshnam Sarvam nishkarsayat jagat Swatantram abodasyeha Kimasat karma bir bhavet. Kala chakram, the wheel of eternal time. Brahmi, revolving automatically. Tikshnam, very sharp. Savam, all. Nishkarshayat, driving. Jagat, the world. Swatantram, independent, not caring for the so-called scientists and philosophers. Abudasya, of one who does not know this principle of time. Iha, in this material world. Kim asat karma bi bhavet. What is the use of engaging in temporary fruitive activities? Translation. So the first part is just really a summary of where we are now. Narada Muni had spoken of a physical object made of sharp blades and thunderbolts. The Har Yashvas understood this allegory as follows. Eternal time moves very sharply, as if made of razors and thunderbolts. Uninterrupted and fully independent, it drives the activities of the entire world. If one does not try to study the eternal element of time, what benefit can he derive from performing temporary material activities? So before we before, I will make a few comments about the verse. Kala chakram, we can almost like visualize it. Chakram means the wheel. And round, Brahmi revolving automatically. So there's an energy of Krishna that's forcing it round, and Tikshnam very sharp. And we experience that ourselves in the sharpness of time. And everywhere, it's affecting everything, all. Sarvam, Nishkarshayat, driving. So yesterday we were talking about getting oxen here. And we'll be driving them. If you don't drive them, they'll just sit down, well, they'll start munching the grass in front of them. You have to tap them. Tell them, tap them, tug them. That's the threefold method of training oxen. You tell them what to do, you tap them, you drive them, and somehow you have to hold them back so they don't go where you don't want them to go. So time is doing that. Time is driving every single aspect of the universe. And Swatantram, it's completely independent. Doesn't matter what you say, what you don't say, it's acting in its own independent power. And a Buddhyasya, one who does not know about time, then they engage themselves in the fleeting aspects of this material world. Kimasat. Asat means it's temporary, the activities. Bhavet, doing, engaging, being. So if you don't know about eternal time, then you get absorbed into the day-to-day things of time. So this is what's been said here in the verse itself. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. This verse explains the words Kshora Pavyam Swayam Brahmi, which especially refer to the orbit of eternal time. He said that time and tide wait for no man. According to the moral instructions of the great politician, Chanakya Pandit, Ayusha Shana Ekopi, Na Labhya Swarna Kotibihi, Na Chen Nirartakam Nitihi, Ka Cha Hanis Tato Dikaha. Even a moment of one's lifetime could not be returned in exchange for millions of dollars. Therefore, one should consider how much loss one suffers if he wastes even a moment of his life for nothing. Living like an animal, not understanding the goal of life, one foolishly thinks that there is no eternity and that this lifespan of 50, 60, or at the most 100 years is everything. This is the greatest foolishness. Time is eternal, and in the material world, one passes through different phases of his eternal life. Time is compared herein to a sharp razor. A razor is meant to shave the hair from one's face. If not carefully handled, the razor will cause a disaster. One is advised not to create a disaster by misusing his lifetime. One should be extremely careful to utilize the span of his life, spiritual realization, or Krishna consciousness. So this verse is all about time. And you often find that, and what's happened is Narada Muni, he saw these Hayashvas, 10,000 of them, but a very important service. Imagine you're given the universe. Often people wonder where the universe comes from. So they have this very important task, create population. That's their duty, to basically generate more and more offspring to populate the universe. So 10,000 of them, and Narada Muni, he thought, well, maybe there's a higher purpose for you. Of course, it was a bit irritating for the person who gave them that role, but that was his. Therefore, he gave them these little conundrums, little codes of deep information. And because they were, first of all, the conundrums made sense. He didn't just imagine something that made no sense. He said things that were full of depth. And therefore, these Haryashvas, who were very intelligent, could actually understand what they meant. So he meant about this wheel. There's a wheel of time that's very sharp, or there's a wheel, Kalachakram, and it's very sharp and it's full of thunderbolts. So now they're now they're explaining what that means. It's sharp because time is sharp. Doesn't matter what you think, time is going to come by and just slice it, cut it. And the word thunderbolt is interesting because sometimes you get like a big shock, a big blowout. In fact, newspapers, they make their money on sharp things and basically thunderbolts. They like thunderbolts. If there's no thunderbolt, then they'll make one up, more or less, to get you, really, what's happening? What's happening? So life is like that. In our life, we experience many shocks, many thunderbolts in our life because of the passing of time. And everyone's suffering the same thing. And it's inevitable. It's inevitable. This is what's being described here. But what's also interesting is that, first of all, you have to understand it. Time, as this poor Prabhupada mentioned, the purport here, quoting Chanakya Pandit, that you can't exchange time. Your time's already gone. You can't get it back. How much money? Of course, I understand that. But think about it. The time's gone. Never to be gone. This morning we were, yesterday's gone. You can't bring back yesterday. It's gone forever, never to return. And time and tide wait for no man. Anyone been to Southend Beach? Anyone been to Southend Beach? Southend Beach is a beach. It's where all those in London go to. It's the closest beach to London, and it's where the mouth of the estuary. And the tide is very important because if you go to the beach at the wrong time, the tide's out. It's like really out, or you get like a big flat plain of mud and snails. So you can't swim till the tide comes in. So if you ever go to Southend, check the tide forecast. You want the tide to be in, so at least it's swim in the sea. The tide's in. So you can't wait. Time and tide wait for no man. In other words, they're going to have their cycles. And it's changing every day. I think the high tide is like an extra hour or more or less. So that's going on, and therefore these guys, they can predict it. So time and tide is going on. So you can't take time. What's also interesting here, I thought was a very, very interesting sentence. Time is eternal, and in the material world, one passes through different phases of his eternal life. That's interesting, combining those two things. So here we are in this body, and we're enjoying our life, and therefore we are passing through different phases of our eternal time. So what we're experiencing now is simply a snippet of our eternal existence, but we're perceiving it through a particular body and a particular social, political, familial lens. We're identifying with a certain type of body, male or female, from a certain geographical location with certain political interests and certain kind of things that we do. We're seeing a little snippet of time, but actually we're eternal. This is one of the earlier messages that Krishna tells Arjuna, that never was there a time when you did not exist, nor me, nor all these kings, nor in the future will any of us cease to be. So we are eternal. We have an eternal time. We're existing eternally. But a little section of our existence is here now, and we happen to be in Lesmahago, in Kurunabhavan, sitting in a certain place. But that's just a little segment of eternal time. And therefore, we're kind of blessed by, we're understanding this. We're understanding that this temporary experience is part of a eternal experience. And we want to come to the point of realizing our eternal existence. So one part of realization is hearing about it from the scriptures and having faith about what they're saying, and to keep the process going here. It's interesting that Prabhupada often takes a little dig here at the scientists. So no matter what they say, in fact, they can't describe where time came from. If you talk about creation or the start of the universe, well, where did time come from? They haven't really got an answer for it. They can measure time. They can calculate things according to time, but they can't explain where time came from. Where did time come from? So time is here. Where in one thing you say it wasn't created because it's eternal. Time actually is eternal, but in terms of the material world, there are phases of time. We can say, well, this universe appeared at a certain time, and it's going to disappear at a certain time. But that's still a period of material time within eternal time. So time is eternal. This is what's being mentioned here. So, and it's independent. Doesn't matter what you say. I was listening to, there was one little devotee gathering, particularly there was a friend of ours who was from Dubai. And he was mentioning how, because there's no rain in Dubai, it's very hot all the time. So you live in AC house, AC car. And if there's any clouds forming, what the government do, they take a plane or something and they seed the clouds to try and trigger the rain. So they're trying to interfere with nature to rain when perhaps it wasn't going to rain. Now we know the method of rain is to chant Hare Krishna. We know that's the method. If you want it to rain, you got to chant Hare Krishna, let it rain. This is what we're told. In the Bhagavad Gita it says, Lord Brahma said, now I've given you the sacrifices by which you can prosper, and the demigods can prosper. Anyway, so they seed the cloud in some way, probably with some kind of aluminium particles or something that's going to poison people. And they know that you don't go out when it rains. When it rains, you stay inside the house, because they know that whatever brought that rain down You don't want to ingest it anyway. But you can't see time. They can't suddenly change time. They want to change time. There's ideas about, these kind of films about time travel. But there's no record of God. There's no record of someone going into the future and coming back in our Shastras. There are people going into the future, but they're never coming back. For example, if you go to where the heavenly planets are, because their time fluctuates differently, you go there, and their time, you could say one's very slow, and here's like years are going by here on their slow times. You come back here, generations have gone by. So you can skip a lot of time on the earth, but you can't come back. There's no sense of kind of going back like that. So here it's described that generally time is in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, time I am the destroyer of all things. So normally we think of time like that. It's going to destroy something. Whatever you have, you're going to lose it. Time I am the destroyer. It's going to destroy everything. You look at the history book, it's full of people trying to create little empires. So the big ones we hear about a lot, the little kind of empire buildings we don't hear about so much, but it's all gone, it's all destroyed. So everything we have now, everything we've tried to create now will be gone materially. It's going to be destroyed. Our own body is going to be destroyed. Then Krishna says, at that time, ante kale chimameva smaran muktva kalevam. At that time, when this body is about to go, at that time, remember me, he says. And then this time, in this body, then that becomes a projection for a projection forward. So what time is it now, please? Sorry, is that clock right? It's 8 o'clock now. Okay, good question. So at that time, when this body is about to go, or when it's going, at that time you remember Krishna, Smaran Muktava Kalevaram. And then departure from this body then becomes a springboard to your eternal time. So the eternal, our experience in eternal time, is, you could say, is waiting for us. It's there, but sometimes we're aware of eternal time, and sometimes we're absorbed in the temporary time. When we're absorbed in the aspirations and desire of this material body, then you could say we're in material time. When we're absorbing ourselves in our Krishna consciousness, then we're experiencing eternal time. So we want to be experiencing eternal time, even when you could say we're dilly-dallying in material time. So this is Krishna consciousness, is to be, therefore, one should be extremely careful to utilize the span of his life for spiritual realization or Krishna consciousness. So we should be careful. We're kind of saying here, be careful. Be careful with your time. It's a valuable asset. Use your time well. Whatever you're doing, add Krishna to it. The whole Bhagavad Gita is about finding different ways to add Krishna to things that you do and perceive throughout the day. So any of you have any thoughts about time? Anything you want to share about your reflections on time? Please do.
So you're saying then time, we're stuck in the time. Does that mean there's somebody, say, can a pure devotee therefore is he, when he's working in Krishna consciousness, there's no time for him. He's in the eternal time for a pure devotee.
Well, it describes here that, let's read again, time is eternal, and in the material world, one passes through different phases of his eternal life. So the pure devotee is aware of his connection with Krishna. So we're eternally connected with Krishna. So he's always aware of that. So it's just that the consciousness that's changing. We're already in eternal time, but because we're identifying with the body, we're seeing it. Oh, I'm getting old. Look in the mirror, and I wasn't the same person I was 20 years ago, and soon I'm going to go. So the pure devotee knows that I'm just wearing this body anyway, and it was going to go anyway, but I'm not identifying with it. I'm just using it in his service. So whether he's got this body or the next body, he's not perplexed by the changes of the time. So it's the same time, but his consciousness is different, how he's perceiving it. That'll be my understanding. Pip.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, thank you. I just had a thought. You're saying how scientists, they don't know where time comes from, where it starts. And I just find it interesting because to the scientists, the explanation of God is too simplistic. It's not complicated enough for their understanding, because everything in the material mindset is always so overcomplicated. I just wonder if you could comment on that, what you think.
Well, they often, for example, when they talk about evolution, they can't detailedly explain evolution. They can't see how one thing, they can't explain how one thing changes to another. They can't explain practically anything in real logical sequence. Therefore, they you may see or remember your biology, look at your biology books. They have this picture of 5 different kind of horses. One's got 5 toes, one's got 3 toes, one's got 1 toe. And they kind of show, see, we came from a 5-toed horse to a 3-toed horse to a 1-toed horse. But therefore, they bamboozle. Sometimes they speak so bamboozling, they bamboozle themselves, and other people, they're also bamboozled, and they can't really explain it. And for example, if you were a computer scientist, I mean, for example, does anyone know how the phone works? Anybody really know how your phone works? And the chips in it. No idea. I suppose someone came here and started talking about it, they could say anything they liked, and we wouldn't be able to say yay or nay to what they were saying, because we don't have expertise in that. So because people are even less aware of these things than the scientists are, then whatever they say, it sounds plausible, because it's over long periods of time. I mean, in a cartoon, you can turn a dinosaur into a goat. Just little you can just physically see. Oh, look, they've changed the dinosaur into a goat on the cartoon. So you can imagine so many things that you can put. You can picturize things, but in reality, they can't do it. So they don't really know these things, and but still they don't take that humility to say, actually, we don't know, because you don't get a job if you don't know. One time I was on a plane, and this guy was doing some kind of preparation, and I could tell from what it was looking. I was like looking over here, looking over his shoulder, and he was doing a presentation about how to combine some kind of artificial chemical with a real chemical or something and get something. I can't remember what it was. And I thought, hang on a minute, do you really believe that? Can you really see what you're trying to explain here? So if your job is to make, if your job is to get paid for presenting something, you'll say anything to make sure you still get paid. And as long as no one complains about it, you'll get paid. So there is some of that. Many kind of weird things are said, and no one really know the difference. They just continue saying it. So where does time come from? They don't know. They don't know where time comes from. Who created time? They don't really know. They have so many different fluctuating ideas. Not my expertise, but for little bits I've read, things like that. Any reflections on time?
Hare Krishna, thank you. 2 things. So you mentioned we know in order to get rain, we should chant Hare Krishna. In Scotland, it rains a bit more. What should we do, bro?
What you do? Well, keep chanting. Because Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, says, I'm the source of the rain and the drought. He doesn't just produce rain, he produces the other side too. So, but for you're blessed that you have rain. Your grass is green. Where I came from, the grass is brown, and you might not be able to put water on it. So at least your grass is green. So you're blessed in that regard. You don't have to worry about water. The water trough for the bulls got filled in a few days. Better to have water than no water. So you're blessed in that sense. But Yeah, keep chanting Hare Krishna. You'll have the sun during the day and the rain at night.
Thank you, bro. Another thing, if you could a bit elaborate or explain a bit more on how time is fully independent. How do we understand like time being fully independent?
Yeah, this is described here. Swatantram. Independent, not caring for the, Prabhupada said, cheekily, in one sense, not caring for the so-called sign. In other words, it's got its own energy about it. It's completely independent. In other words, it's functioning without there's nothing you can do to influence time. You can simply watch it go by. You can simply make your plans how you're going to utilize your space within time, but you can't influence time. It's pushing you along. It's forcing you through change all the time. Like when you have a desire, Krishna says, Eko Bhahunam Yo Varidhati Kaman. From the one comes the many who fulfills your desire. So when you have a desire, I really would like something. You planted a seed, and then time is the energy that will fructify for you to fulfill that desire. So in that period, in the energy of time, your desire will be fulfilled. So you can't stop that. The way to stop it is you stop having material desires, you desire for Krishna, and then you no longer have to have a material, you're no longer suffering from material time, but then you're in the transcendental time, where in there's no past, present, it's all eternal time. So how is it independent? Well, because it's not dependent on anything else. For it's there. It's a force, and it's a manifestation of Krishna's energy, and it's completely independent. It's not dependent on anything else for its ability. You can't influence it, no matter what you say. Just some thoughts I had on that. So what does time mean to you when you hear about these things, the eternal time? What comes to you? If you were giving a talk about this time, what would you say?
Well, what I would say about time is so precious, and the short span of life, which is a flickering. This short span of life is such a flickering. To use it as wisely as possible, and we know to use it to try to reunite to the eternal time, which is the spiritual world. To utilize time to reconnect to the eternal spiritual world, to Krishna.
Mm. Yeah, when you get older, I think I may be the oldest person here. I'm 62 years old. Oh, I feel young then. How old are you, Brew? 69. So when you get to about 60, you definitely know there's less time in front than there's behind. And it makes you think about the world in a different way, just naturally, because you can't plan things in the same way when you get older. So all that time's gone. Therefore, but the time's going to go. We are going to get old. If we don't die early, we're going to get old, and we'll die then when we get old. So what are you going to do with that time? How can you plan for it the best way? So yeah, take care of your material things that you need, but don't waste it completely on thinking that's going to satisfy you. First of all, whatever you do materially ain't going to satisfy. Whatever you do spiritually will satisfy you. So therefore, don't waste the time completely, but add Krishna to it and enjoy it materially and also enjoy it spiritually. That's what we're being imbibed there. There's a thing called Trikalagya, which means knowledge of past, knowledge of present, and knowledge of the future. So we're also meant to be Trikalagya. And for example, if I said to you now that, well, if I'm going to manifest some Trikalagya, in about 4 months' time, it's going to get very cold here, and the rain will probably keep coming down, and it's probably going to be, dark. That's Trikalagya. That within a period of material time, we go through these phases. Because I knew it happened last year. We know it happened regularly, so we can predict it's going to happen the year after. Interesting enough, this is where in the Bhagavatam, when Vyasadeva talks about what's coming in Kali Yuga, it's not that this is the first Kali Yuga. We know this is about the 500th Kali Yuga in this day of Brahma. So the things that is going to coming down the pike, you could say, down the road, are the things that came in the road for the previous 500 Kali Yugas. So that helps you throw, hang on a minute. So there's a lot of people went by. In our life now, we're in this particular period of time that's calculated in a certain day of Brahma at a certain time, a certain period of time, and we think it's very important. Prabhupada's here. People think that this particular 50 or 60 years in the history of mankind is the most important. But the millions and billions and trillions of people who went before us, that was what they were thinking. And the millions and billions and trillions of people who are coming after us, that's what they were thinking. That's the nature of material time. For their 50, 60 years, it's the most important. Oftentimes you find like that, don't you? People think this is the most important time in history. And we're living in that point in history. And the next generation will say the same thing. And they'll say the same thing. So yeah, time's going to go by. Whether we participate in it or not, things are going to go by. So how are we going to utilize our time? How are we going to get the best use of our time? And that's about adding Krishna to it. That's how we get the best use of our time. We do what we need to do, take care of our body, take care of our family, take care of our country. But at the same time, we have to for spiritual realization or Krishna consciousness, to realize that we're not the body, we're not slaves of time, we're actually eternal. We can just watch time go by and not be affected by it because we're spirit souls, eternal. Any other thoughts or reflections on time?
Yeah, like this analogy of razor. Analogy of razors. So if you use the razor properly, it can shave you. So time being representative of Krishna, if you align yourself with the phases of time, I mean, even in Krishna consciousness, like Varnashram Dharma, it's to do this like a period of time, Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha. You're going through different stages of life, and if you align yourself, you have to, the whole thing is to, at the end of it, you have to become detached from matter and attached to spirit. And if you're using the time wisely, that's going to be the end result. That by the end of it, you're kind of ready to go to the next destination. But if you are not using the time, or you're going against the principle of time, then there will be so many kind of shocking situations when you kind of squeezed out of your, maybe some situations in terms of profession, in terms of like various types of family situations and crises and etc. If you kind of don't see that ultimate goal in life, it can really throw you out of the kind of normal state of even peacefulness, and can be very disturbing, or even like a thunderbolt. There's another one, that time can act as a thunderbolt, which is like if you're not prepared, if you know that a thunderbolt is coming, and it comes, but you are like, because you knew that it's gonna come, it's not so disturbing. But if you is completely unaware that it's gonna just strike soon, it can really throw you off guard. You can have like almost like a heart attack, if you're not ready for it. So yeah, just alignment with the power of time and going against the power of time. And you can see a lot of people are dragging their kind of energy against the time, in terms of trying to prolong their youth, trying to prolong before they take responsibility. That's a big thing in life. They try to avoid responsibility as much as possible before they maybe enter the married life or that kind of thing. They kind of missing out a lot of things that kind of arranged by Krishna that you have to go through. So anyway, just a couple of thoughts on the razor and thunderbolt.
Yeah, the thunderbolt's coming. We're all going to experience it. When's the next thunderbolt going to come? We don't know. And actually, one of the Krishna's early instructions is Matra Sparshas to Kontaya Shitoshna Sukadukada Agamapai no Nichas Tams Tikshas for Bharat. He said tolerate, because just like unhappiness comes after happiness. Happiness comes after unhappiness. So if we're not experiencing a thunderbolt today, maybe we'll experience a thunderbolt tomorrow. It's going to come. Therefore, we shouldn't be complacent. We're all going to find shocks of one sort or the other. So that's the nature of material time. Funny, when you were talking about raises, I was remembering we used to shave, when I was a devotee of the temple, we used to shave heads with a big razor, and we'd cut off the guard, and then you had to shave through hair with a big razor, and you had to hold the blade in a certain way so you didn't catch the skin. You know, because it's just a razor right there. You take out, we remember just shaving heads with a razor blade. Or you used to get these 3-piece old-time razors, and again, you wouldn't put the guard on. You'd screw it up so the blade would bend down, and then you could shave a head like that. So you had to hold it in a certain way so you don't nick the skin. Because even now with a Gillette Mach 4 or something, you can still cut yourself shaving if you're not careful. So time is like that. They have to handle it carefully. If you don't utilize your time well, then one thing, you're cutting yourself because you're not getting the best out of that opportunity. And actually we know that if we don't use our time well, we don't feel satisfied. But if you utilize your time well, even materially speaking, if you utilize your time well, you feel satisfied. But if you utilize your time in Krishna consciousness, you really feel satisfied. When you absorb yourself in Krishna, in whatever medium you're doing it, you feel that sense of deep inner satisfaction. And when we're not, then we just feel molded out, you could say. Okay, anyone else get any reflections and comments about time? Please.
In Gita, what I've read is that Brahma lives for 100 years, and 100 years every day is like 10,000 years for us, and 10,000 years in the night, what he spends as the eternal time. So it's very long time what he lives as. But the time which we get is in the time we are talking about, the materialistic time. So our life is so short as compared to what the universe lives for. So that is like a thunderbolt or a razor. It's such a short life. And that is the life when we can actually get engaged into the Krishna consciousness or help our soul to reunite with our Creator. And this is such a short time that we should use this time as much as possible to get connected to our souls, to the Creator, so that we don't waste it. And then when we die, we should think about Krishna, so that when we die, our soul should go to Krishna instead of being caught in this life again and again in different bodies. So I think this is a very important verse which talks about this in a very in depth actually. This is what I felt when I read this one earlier.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks.
Actually, while you were speaking, I was reflecting on this point about time and the comparison between our periods of time and, let's say, the demigods. Yeah. That they're seeing that people, I mean, they're living like, thousands and thousands of years comparatively to Earth time. So they can see that people on Earth at this time can become Krishna conscious and go back to Godhead in many cycles of people's time in their life. Therefore, we hear and we read that they're queuing up to take birth in Kali Yuga because you can go back to Godhead very quickly. So imagine that they're seeing people in their day, the kind of people going back to Godhead in their time.
Yes.
So this Earth time is short, but you could say it's got special potency. The Lord's holy name, the associated devotees, you can go back to Godhead in one lifetime of 50 or 60 years if you just apply diligently.
And that reminds me of some different creatures actually, which lives just for one day for us. But that one day for them might be a very long time for them. So time is different for different people actually.
Mm-hmm.
So 1 second for us is not this 1 second for the creature who is just living for one day. It may be much longer for them. So the time which we get is very short. Although we are able to live in each and every second, but at least it will go very quickly as compared to the time which is there in the actual time, eternal time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other reflections, comments? Okay,
I have one more.
please.
Just was reminded of this very powerful verse actually that says, with every rising and setting of the sun, it decreases the duration of life, with the exception of one who utilizes that time for hearing and chanting the names, glories, and pastimes of the Lord. So even if we use our time very wisely materially, if we are not engaged in Krishna consciousness, it will be taken away at the time of death. Everything that we achieved is taken away, and we start again in the next life. So although we may be very, very fantastically utilized our time every moment for sense gratification or achieving some amazing goal, but then it's all gone. But if we engage ourselves in Krishna consciousness, that's eternal activity of the soul, and therefore the influence of time, in one sense, is no longer acting on a devotee. It's only kind of bringing it's already engaged, devotee is already engaged in something that they do in a spiritual world. So in that sense, that influence of time is no longer there, because it's not taking everything away, but it's now connecting to Krishna. You're using your time exactly the same way as you're going to use it in a spiritual world. So therefore, that material influence of time is no longer there.
Thank you. While you're speaking, I was thinking of a thunderbolt. Remember, in our previous life, we're forgotten. All the people we loved in our previous life, we don't even know who they are anymore. Our mothers, our fathers, our husbands, our wives, our children. We don't know who they are. So similarly, all the family we have now, in our next life, we won't know who they are then. So it's kind of a sobering bit of a thunderbolt. That all the people we love now will be forgotten in the course of time, and we'll have forgotten them, as we forgot all our previous husbands and wives and mothers and fathers and children. So this one will also be the same. We'll also be this will also be forgotten. Just a record that may last a few years. It'll all be lost. But our relationship with Krishna is eternal, and we're carrying him all the time, and he's just there with us all the time. Okay, we'll stop there. Srimad Bhagavatam ki.
His Grace Shyamsundar Prabhu ki jai.